Hey, welcome back to Ross's Game Dungeon. Now, last episode got a little intense. I had a few people contact me to tell me that it made them feel ill. It definitely left an odd aftertaste. So I wanted to detox with a game that's practically the exact opposite. Hinterland. This is an action RPG city management game. Not a lot of those. This game checks off a few boxes the same as Dungeon Siege. Totally generic medieval fantasy, the story doesn't matter, and great gameplay I haven't seen anywhere else. Well, that's not completely true, but I'll come to that. So if we begin, this is one of those games where you have to make a bunch of decisions right away. Now normally I'm not the biggest fan of games with no story that you tweak every parameter of like this right at the start, mostly because it erodes the illusion for me that this is its own little world and not just some game with numbers to check off. But there's no avoiding it here. What's worse is that this screen is literally the most important decision you will make the entire game. But you can't really make an informed decision until you play the game. So here, I'll do you a favor and suggest this is what beginners should try out. These classes you can start as make a really big difference. In general, you have to decide whether you want to focus more on combat, more on city management, or something in between. Seasoned soldier of the realm who knows everything about combat and nothing about running a town. Now, I know this is going to disappoint some people, so I should just get this out of the way. If you've ever wanted to play as the Green Goblin chucking pumpkin bombs at everybody, you can't do that here. You have to choose one or the other. Pumpkin bombs or the Green Goblin. You can't have both. I know. But you can play as a dwarf warrior. As if I'm gonna pick something else now that they've dangled that in front of me. Maybe the dwarf foreman. Still, there are a lot of good options here to mix up the gameplay. Except the elf. Who'd want to play as an elf? Well, maybe you would, but look at this guy. He's only good with the bow. That's such a bad... You know what? I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start. So here's the closest thing we're gonna get to a story. This is even more anemic than Dungeon Siege. But I'll take what I can get. So the really short version is the king needs you to build a town and clear out this region of monsters. And that's it. Except for the town building part, you could probably apply that to 100 different RPGs. I like how the king looks half bored, half grumpy. I get the feeling as soon as he's done talking with me, he's gonna throw something at the jester to try and feel better. I don't think he wanted this job. Okay, so the first thing you want to do depends entirely upon which class you picked and what's going on when you start. Now I'm playing as the dwarf, and for all his strengths, he didn't bring a lot of food with him. He ate it all. So I have just a couple days before I starve. I can hire people to help produce food for me, but I can't just pick anybody. I have to wait until somebody useful visits my town. If you're lucky, you'll get a farmer or a rancher right off the bat. If you're unlucky, you'll get a bard. Yeah, I'll invite a bard to join my fledgling town struggling to get off the ground. Might as well sign my own death warrant right now. Man, you don't want the bard. Some of these visitors are really useful later, once you have more resources, just not at the start of the game. But not the bard. At no point in this game do you need a bard. Get the hell out of my town. Outside of town, this game turns into a Diablo clone. Enemies run at you, and you bash them into submission. On the minimap, the little dots represent how tough the enemies are. The farther you get from town, generally the tougher they get. And once you clear all the enemies in an area, some regions have special bonuses that benefit your town. Like if you free up a region with stone or iron, that lets your blacksmith craft more advanced items. And hey, monsters don't respawn. You clear out a region, they're gone for good. It makes you feel like you're actually doing something here. Also, when there is loot, a lot of it is stuff that benefits specific professions. So you might get a snare to give your trapper, a hoe for your farmer. Then when you're back in town, they can equip it and get a boost in productivity. This gives a lot more purpose to the loot than most Diablo clones. It makes me appreciate it a lot more. And see, that's the beauty of Hinterland. Because while this is a city building game, maybe you're not the best mayor in Sim City. But that's okay. You just have to beat the crap out of everything. I am totally down with this. We have a beatdown-based economy. Okay, maybe you guys can debunk or reinforce this notion, but I get the impression that people who are really, really good at city management games are more likely to be accountants, programmers, system administrators, something like that. I suspect there's some sort of correlation there. Well, this is the city building game for everybody else. I tend to be okay at city management games, but the more variables they like to throw at me, the more I can get overwhelmed. Usually my style is I tend to have mild success, but then all it takes is one disaster and I'm stuck in a ditch forever. Oh no, the town's flooded. Now the police are on strike. Citizens are moving out. It's ruined. Everything's ruined. I'll never recover from this. Or even if I do, it'll happen again and be even worse. There's no point to anything. Well, in Hinterland, you can always just pick up your sword and solve all your problems by killing everything in sight. How great is that? And once you have some gold, you can build houses for your visitors. Then you're on your way to developing your town. Imagine wanting to move to a new town, but you can't afford the houses. So instead, the mayor goes out and kills goblins, then builds your house for you. And hey, if you still don't have enough to eat, well then the mayor runs out to kill more goblins until he has enough supplies so you do get fed. He will not rest until your needs are met. World's best mayor. Now before I go praising things too much, I may as well get this out of the way. This game came out in 2008, and by then most developers had figured out how to handle widescreen resolutions, but not everybody. So while this technically does support widescreen, it's like that ski game where all they do is chop off the top and the bottom. Not only does this make you feel like you have your nose to the ground the entire time, but it's a big disadvantage because enemies can come at you where you can't see them. But most of all, look at this town view here. I literally cannot build up at the top here anymore, and there's no way to scroll up. The mid-2000s were really the dark ages for this sort of thing. I always find this frustrating because unlike 2D games, old 3D ones can have proper widescreen, likely very easily with the right code tweak. They just don't. Back to 4x3. So after fighting every monstrosity outside your glorious village, you start to notice that they're taking a piece of you with them. Now you do start with some health potions depending on the class, but these are hard to come by in the beginning, and you can't rely on them to carry you through this. So what do? You run back to town, that's what. As soon as you cross this little rocky border, all the characters heal in town. Now the dwarf heals outside of town too because he's awesome, but not that much. You still have to run back to town for a break. Except this guy. If you want to play as the undead, he heals anywhere. He has no connection to town or much of anything in this life. I guess you can do that, but I can't imagine your denizens are gonna trust you then. I mean, how could they? I don't. You run back to town an awful lot in this game. I can't decide if that's a good thing or not. It certainly adds a sense of urgency to things. It's like real life. You go to the grocery, notice your apartment is on fire, so you have to run back. Uh-oh, enemies are gonna kill me. Better run back to town. Whoops, looks like I need to tell another bard to get lost. Better run back to town. Uh-oh, raiders are coming from the north. Time to run back to town. Yeah, an optional feature is that your town gets attacked by raiders every few minutes like clockwork. Oops, a gang of barbarians is coming to trash the place. Oops, a gang of giants is coming to trash the place. Oops, a gang of dragons is coming to trash the place. It's a good concept, it's just too predictable in practice. I'd rather see 2 goblins show up, maybe a stray dog, than a whole month passes and nothing happens. Until one day an army of 200 barbarians from the north descends upon me. Something like that. I can take it. I'm a dwarf. Yeah, come get some, elf. Elves! Okay, let's talk about why elves suck. Look at this guy, thinking he's all that with his bow. Yeah, a bow is exactly what you want in this game. No, it's not. Okay, different RPGs can favor different playstyles. I'd say Titan Quest favors melee characters since almost every enemy just runs right at you. Divine Divinity, on the other hand, really favors ranged characters to start off. Well, Hinterland definitely leans towards Titan Quest. Every enemy runs right at you, or else ranged ones just stand there. No enemy runs away from you, ever. So yeah, you can show up with your fancy bow, but they're gonna be smashing your face in with an axe before you can draw 2 arrows. So why bother? Okay, I've done my duty here. If you still want to play an elf after what I just told you, that's on you. So this is pretty much the pattern for the rest of the game. You build up your town more and more and continue your campaign of Manifest Destiny until you can tame the far corners of the map. Now you do level up and get better items, but overall you do not keep pace with how tough the enemies get. You need help from either brewing potions, wizards, or something else. Now you can recruit any member in town to stop what they're doing and come fight with you, so maybe we can find a use for these bards after all. But as much as I love the idea of putting my own posse together to clean up these hills, I found this tricky in practice. There are a lot of variables that go into keeping your crew alive, and they typically didn't add up for me. If they die, that's a real pain in the ass too, because this isn't Warcraft. I can't just train another equally capable soldier. I have to hope somebody else qualified visits my town in the next few days, and I can salvage gear off the old one's body, re-equip them. It just sucks. Plus, my guys like to fight to the bitter end, which is problematic. See, the secret to survival in this game is knowing when to run away. King Arthur had the right idea. That's why he was the king. But let's talk some more about how this game can suck. I guess we have the music. The music does not suck. It's pretty great. Except there are only 4 tracks. Menu music, town music, wilderness music, and raider music. That's it. So it's good, but you're inevitably going to get tired of it. It's very difficult to pull off a music theme that you don't get tired of. Oh, and let's talk about portals. If you clear out a region with a portal, you can fast travel back to town. I hate these things. Why? They are too damn loud. Look at how far away I am, and I can still hear it. There, that's about the boundary. This is terrible sound design. You're going to get sick of this sound. This extends to town, too. I have to go to the complete southern end of town not to hear this. The vast majority of all residents in town are going to hear this portal sound at all times. I can see why people want a bard now. They want to hear something, anything, besides this damn portal sound. Next, you may have noticed how this isn't necessarily the smoothest looking game. Well, it's not. Look at this. Look at his shadow. It's moving at a slower frame rate than he is. There must be some interesting physics going on in this world for that to happen. And speaking of interesting light, did you notice how this game has a night and day cycle? See, there it is, a new day. While the lighting is always exactly the same, you can hear the night in the sound effects. Yeah, that totally sounds like a bright and sunny day. But back to the frame rate, because we're not done with that. Here are the loading times for running this game with VSync off, so the computer runs at an uncapped frame rate. Nothing unusual there. Now let's take a look at the times with VSync on. So that means on my system, it's capped at 60 frames per second. Man, that might be the biggest differential I've seen. This also happened in The Chosen Well of Souls. I just didn't mention it since that was the least of that game's problems. So you can either waste time and get a cleaner picture, or waste power and get faster load times. Even if you have one of those monitors with a stupid high refresh rate, because I'm sure people run a lot of games at 240 frames per second. What? Unless your screen has over a 1 kilohertz refresh rate, you're still gonna see some slowdown with VSync. I made fun of it in another video, but I guess that's what Fast Sync is designed for. This game right here. And The Chosen. And while we're staring at things, I will say these loading screens are all awesome. I think this one is my favorite. It really captures the life of a farmer. And look at this guy's face. You know this find is gonna change his whole life. You can just look at this and tell this is the beginning of the story. The menu screen is great too. I can only assume that's me, looking determined to settle this land, with my trusty assistant who's probably gonna die before the game is over. Could this woman be a witch? Orcs! Now there's a secret to this game, but before we get to that, I guess we better talk about orcs a second. See, technically, this game isn't Hinterland, but Hinterland Orc Lords. This used to be digitally distributed only, but in 2009 they released a mini expansion for it where you can play as orcs. This was part of a move of putting this as a boxed copy in store shelves. And despite all this great loading art, they managed to put the lamest picture I can imagine on the cover. It's another class remix. They eat twice as much, but the humans count as food, so it all balances out. It's not that big a deal though, since you really don't get the full orc experience. You don't get to burn enemy villages to the ground, unleash packs of wolves upon women and children, construct effigies made out of human heads. It's really just another class. Now the reason I'm pointing this out is today, this will be DLC that you pay a few bucks for. But no, this was completely free if you own the game. And this is on top of the Halloween update, which added the undead guy, scarecrows, and pumpkin bombs. I'm mostly just bringing this up for historical purposes. Once upon a time, DLC used to be free, and you only paid money for an actual expansion. And people used to use telegraphs to communicate. Yeah, the genie's out of that bottle now. While working at my pumpkin farm, I can produce 2 food per day and exploding pumpkins. Sold. Okay, so here's the secret to this game. If you play on long mode, this can take a while. Take a look, I'm not even halfway done clearing out the map. Well, that doesn't matter, because if you can hold on long enough to get a necromancer, you've already won the game. Now, they're not easy to come by since they have a lot of requirements, but if you're patient, you can glide your way to the finish line. Before a necromancer will join you, you need an acolyte, which you can turn to worshipping at a temple of good or evil. I find it amusing this is such a casual choice for the acolyte. Like, he's totally cool with whichever one you pick. Oh, a temple of evil? Yeah, that's cool, man. No problem. Go team evil. Now, once you recruit a necromancer, they'll start summoning skeletons. Well, you need to tell them to put a hold on that and research more powerful skeletons instead. After some time, the skeletons will level up. But here's the thing. Best I can tell, there's no level cap on this. If you don't tell him or her to stop, the necromancer will just keep on researching more powerful skeletons. More and more powerful. So now, this is going to be like a cooking show, and we're going to take a break here and just leave Hinterland running in the background. I'll check back in a while, and we'll see what things look like. Okay, so I've left Hinterland running for a couple hours now, and if my necromancer isn't still researching more powerful skeletons. Well, I think they've had enough time in the oven, so we'll start summoning some now. We'll cut back to that, but before we do, let's show you what would happen if I were to try to solo the outer region by myself. This is really stupid. I'm only doing this because I have my save backed up. I'm coming for you, giant. Huh, doesn't look like I'm hurting him too much. Alright, there are his friends. Yeah. And see, I'm a dwarf warrior, so I'm stronger than any other class in the game pretty much. Or rather, any living character. Now we'll skip ahead a bit, and here we are with a pack of summoned skeletons. I am the same level I was before, territory still unconquered. Now let's pay those giants a visit from the Medieval Fantasy Homeowners Association. Things are going a little more smoothly now. Sir, you are in violation of Ordinance 5103, being a giant. I'd like to emphasize these are the hardest enemies in the game on the hardest difficulty. If I pick on somebody more my own level, they snap like twigs. So if you're willing to let the game idle a couple hours, anyone could beat this with a necromancer. But let's do it the real way, through dwarf might. I finally clear out these damn dragons, and congratulations, I cleared the realm. This is a pretty pathetic ending, but I can't say the game was leading me on to expect anything different. You can try and beat my score if you want, which you probably can because I didn't care about bards. So Hinterland leaves me with a lot of mixed impressions, but mostly a good sense of frustration. This is another one of those games that occupies that no man's land between a casual game and a fleshed out one with some meat on it. The end result is it leaves me hungry for more, because this formula of mixing a hack and slash with city building is really satisfying. You both create and destroy. It's got the duality of man covered. Your hammer can be used to craft armor or bash some orc's face in. It's like poetry. Now, I said I haven't seen gameplay like this anywhere else. Well, there is one game series that comes pretty close. ActRaiser. That has both the city management and action combat together in one nice package. Now, while I think the presentation and atmosphere of ActRaiser is way better, I think Hinterland still wins out on the gameplay. The transition between the two types of gameplay is so much more fluid and connected in Hinterland, whereas it's a wall separating the two in ActRaiser. Okay, I guess there's also Depths of Peril, but that game. This is not a game that needs a remake, but it's screaming to be a foundation for something else. I'm not sure how you would expand upon this, because if you made your town too big, it would become more of a strategy game. But if you kept going out farther into the wilderness, you might lose track of your town. It must be a tricky balance. That's a job more for the dwarf foreman to figure out. I was just the dwarf warrior. I kind of want to just lock a game designer in a room with nothing but Hinterland and ActRaiser and not let them out until they figure out a new design. This game is gold ore. I see the potential gleaming within, but it's rough in its current state, and I'm sure many would pass it by not realizing what they're looking at. I almost did. Okay, that's the episode. Stay tuned for the next one for a back to school
special.
What, you thought I was gonna talk about pumpkin bombs and not show them off? Come on, let's do this. Okay, got my bombs. Equip them in hand. It's pumpkin time.
Oh yeah.
What? That's just a crappy fireball. These are the worst pumpkin bombs I've ever seen. Look, it doesn't even show up in his hand, but you can see the pumpkin in the shadow. I'm sorry, everyone. Here, I need to revise this. Where is he? You! You think you're the great pumpkin? You're a disgrace! Get out of my town and take that pathetic excuse for a pumpkin bomb with you. Friggin' pumpkin scammers.